hello. Hello, Gary Ross and Matthew McConaughey. I hope you're hearing me, and thank you for joining us in Paris. Well, almost. Hello, hello. To discuss Free State of Jones. Are you hearing us well?
No, I have feedback from the studio monitor here.
All right, so we're getting our sound. Yes?
I'm hearing you back.
All right, so...
That's cool. I mean,
that's cool? All right.
Well, not really.
Here we are. Just a little... Just a little touch up.
The 17th. What are you here for?
Launched it on Wild Turkey.
Oh, how did it go? Did you kill it?
I'll show you.
I heard you were working with somebody that I was trying to hire.
Jeff Strickland.
Oh.
I didn't get it.
You didn't. You're casting.
Are we okay?
You're
Are we okay now?
Trish Somerville.
Trish Somerville. I went after it hard. Not enough prep for her. I said, not enough prep for me either, Trish, and I do the movie.
She's great.
I know. Who shot it for you?
Jeff.
Grunwald?
Yeah. I'll show you.
Fuck you. I'm sure it looks fine.
Are we ready?
It's going to be the king. Yeah, he's not bad, by the way. Did you guys get along? Was it fun? Yeah, he's good.
I'll tell you what.
Was he quick?
Yeah, but it honestly had a thin design.
Yeah, I know. Did it hold up?
A range, 30-second piece.
Yeah.
You had to be out of room 1 in 7 seconds.
Yeah.
You had to be out of room 2 in 12 minutes. You had to be out of room.
And did it work the way you imagined?
Gary, Matthew, are you ready?
You like that?
Really?
Honestly, I miss it.
Yeah, we just haven't seen each other in a long time.
All right, we don't want to barge into a private conversation here. Thank you for being here, really, with us to discuss Free States of Jones in Paris, live from New York. I mean, this is a question really to start with for both of you, because, I mean, Gary, this story had been on your mind for almost 10 years before you even wrote the script. And you, Matthew, you are this character of of such a passion. I wanted to know what fascinated each of you, for different reasons maybe, into this almost unknown story, an incredible character. So Gary, let's hear you first.
Wow. It's so much fun to do this because normally you do these in such a row, in the United States. You do so many of these interviews that you don't actually, you end up saying the same thing all the time. So I haven't really talked about this in a while. So I'll answer like it's a real question and give you
Good.
I think that I was so fascinated in history, and the history I didn't know. And I got very, very swept up in that, and it became kind of a weird, major part of my life that I ended up studying in a different way than I relate to most movies. And I think sometimes in life you find a passion that grabs you, and this one grabbed me, and I feel very lucky to have been able to do it. And a huge part of this movie was the study for me, and learning about the topic as much as almost making the movie. And so, yeah, I feel very privileged to have had that opportunity.
What about you, Matthew? What fascinated you in that character and time period?
Well, first of all, I'd never heard of him, as most people in the world, and even Americans, had never heard of him. So here was this lost story of a great man during the Civil War that sort of lived on an island, he and his night company, sort of in between the North and the South, and sort of slipped out of the slipstream of the history books even. Newton Knight as a man, I think what fascinated me the most is he had such a clear identity. All right? He was not a simple man, but at the same time, his convictions and his clarity of right and wrong were very simple. And once he made up his mind and he saw a wrong, he sacrificed his own family, he sacrificed his own considerable well-being, you could call it, because he couldn't turn an eye or turn his back to trying to right a wrong. So that clarity, he had the way he could make his mind up and see so clearly in a moment, wait a minute, no one should have chains like that around their neck. that should come off. We've got to do something about it. If he saw a wrong, he couldn't not try and unright it. He had to try and right every wrong. So that clarity and the identity and the way that man could make that decision, damn be the consequences. The self-assuredness and understanding, clarity of him, I think was really what I hooked into and fascinated me about it.
And you know, I would add something to that, which is that in a modern context, we have a lot of trouble understanding somebody who could engage this kind of a fight with this much clarity and this little ambiguity. You know, we search for ambiguity, we search for nuance. And 100 years ago, when you're talking about slavery and you're talking about the ownership of human beings and you're talking about poor farmers being exploited to maintain slavery, he didn't see any nuance. No. He didn't, and he saw complete clarity. And it was very interesting to me now, having a little distance, having gone through the release of the movie and everything, that's sometimes a hard thing to understand in a modern context. That somebody can be this simple, this pure, this gutsy, and lay his life on the line repeatedly for something that was principle, to the point where many people even doubted, well, the principle couldn't have been that pure. No, it actually was. You know, Newton Knight had a great quote at the end of his life. He was looking back on the whole thing, and they said to him, what did it all come down to? And he said, you know, I'm not saying I agree with this or disagree, this is what he said, this is a quote. If the average man, the average farmer had risen up and killed all the slave owners, we never would have had this terrible war. And that's a conviction that he held. That's how he felt at that time. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with that sentiment, but you know, he had a pretty strong, clear conviction.
You said it, no ambiguity. Onto his principle and understanding.
All right, let's hear it more from this gentleman. You can stand up if you want.
Hello. First thing, sorry for my English. Second thing, congratulations for your movies, you both. And I had a question, but you answered to it with the last question, so I will let the microphone. Congratulations to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Question ici, de ce côté.
Hi, thank you for this little talk. Je posais ma question en
Mais
français.
oui, allez-y, n'hésitez pas.
Je voudrais poser une question à Mathieu, savoir si pendant qu'il faisait ce film, il avait en tête le souvenir de A Time to Kill, qu'il a tourné il y a très exactement 20 ans et qui partage certaines thématiques et notamment le sujet. Du coup, est-ce que c'est un sujet qui lui tient particulièrement à cœur pour avoir fait 2 films sur ce sujet-là à 20 ans d'intervalle?
Matthew, this is a question for you. I mean, while filming, at any point, did you have some flashes, memories back from a film you did almost 20 years ago, A Time to Kill, with not exactly the same thematics, but however, some crucial core issues at times? Is it an issue that really interests you as well?
Yes, it is an issue, obviously, that still I have interest in. I mean, my job as an actor is to, do my best to at the humanities, and race and relation of race worldwide and in America has always been something that I've had my eye on, tried to understand, that was a Time to Kill was a singular story of a man. When is there a time, if there was ever a time, to take out the kind of vengeance that Carl Lee Haley did, and then there's a great flip in the closing arguments that Jake Brigance had about, okay, you've heard this story. Now what? Now imagine it was your daughter that it happened to, and it's an all white jury. Now imagine if she's white. This was a piece of the Free State of Jones was a piece of American history. Really, what so much of that whole war was based on in the first place. And here was a man, Newton Knight, with these principles that we talked about earlier, that really was clear in what he stood for. and was willing to die for it, and fought alongside many other men that were willing to, and women that were willing to die for it as well. And I want to go back to what Gary said a minute ago about the lack of ambiguity is so clear, and there was freedom in that for me as just an actor to be able to find somebody with that clarity, because there are so many more shades of gray and compromise and paradox and juxtaposition today with what's right and what's wrong. Well, let's listen to both sides and let's talk it out. This was a man of action, and damn be the consequences. And I believe in what he was fighting for. He was he saw humanity for what it was, and it wasn't about anything on the surface. There's a right and there's a wrong, and somebody should be treated this way, and somebody should be left well enough alone this way, and somebody should not be treated this way. And if you're going to treat them that way, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, and also I would add to that that made him pretty unique in the era. I mean, for a white Southern farmer to embrace this cause, to be this vehemently opposed to slavery. His grandfather was a slave trader. He eschewed completely slavery, refused to own slaves, was a vehement opponent of slavery. And for someone like this to develop this kind of a conscience and to keep fighting after the war was over. There were a lot of people who were opposed to the Confederacy during the war, but to keep fighting for the rights of African Americans in the 10 years after that war.
That's when he was really an underdog.
Yeah, I mean, it made him just a completely unique individual. And I think if the movie shows anything, it shows the need for, or the potential of, an economic coalition that's based on commonality instead of difference. And I think that's, I was always asked, well, what is the lesson you see for today? How can you take inspiration today? And I think that, Matthew said it great months ago. He said that what was divided by race should have been united by class. And that sometimes in Europe, you all have a better understanding of the importance that class plays than sometimes Americans do. We tend to default to cultural distinctions and differences. And that Newtonite showed that a coalition based on class could exist, and it's something he believed in. So that made him pretty remarkable, I think.
Question, le micro est ici.
How did you work with Benoît Delhomme, your French director of photography? Because there are a lot of outdoor sets with water, sometimes fire. Was it more difficult to shoot on them for Gary, and more easier to act on them for Mathieu?
Well, Benoit's a wonderful man, a wonderful DP. I also have a French editor in Juliette Wolfling, who you probably know. I think, she cuts Jacques Audiard's films as well. So, and I'm now working with a French costume designer. So I clearly like your country as far as that's concerned. Benoit and I were, I think the challenge, there's a tremendous challenge in matching, and at a certain point, we just couldn't. The scope of the movie was so huge, we didn't really have time to silk things or, the things that one might if the schedule was not so brutal. But, this is such a huge movie. The most I'd ever shot before, I think on Hunger Games, was 1.5 million feet of film. And the digital equivalent on this movie was 2.5 million feet of film. And it was, often shooting with 4 cameras, often in tremendously difficult elements that were just very, very, very hard to negotiate and to deal with. We were in the swamps, we were outside, we were under some tough conditions. And so I think that was probably the greatest challenge, really working outside. But I had a wonderful time with Benoit. He was wonderful to work with. And I think everybody, when they get into a movie that is this demanding physically, everybody kind of rises to it and enjoys it. I even miss it right now.
Do you miss him too? Matthew, do you miss him too? I mean, was the work with him very special because he's French, or because you could discuss with him different views? And this is what the gentleman wanted to know as well.
When working with Benoit?
Benoit, yes. He also wanted to know what your experience working with Benoit was.
Well, my experience was excellent. I mean, look, Benoit is so committed to being the director of photography. I mean, that's what he's thinking about when he's not on the set. He's an artist.
Yeah.
Any conversations you have with him he sees the world through a different lens. He sees it through his lens, the way he approaches things, the way he'll have any conversation about any topic off the movie. He's a very got a big heart. Benoit's a very big heart,
and always
very kind man.
enthusiastic for the image constantly. You know, that's I guess what I meant when you're outside and you're in the swamp or you're in these kind of conditions. He's as excited for the image on day 70 in those circumstances as he is in the beginning, and it's very hard to stay that enthusiastic by that point in the movie. And so I think that was really remarkable in working with him.
Yeah, he lives and breathes it.
Yeah.
Question over here.
Congratulations, really powerful film. Something I knew nothing about at all. I don't think anybody probably here in this room knew anything about it before. I'm just wondering about the Knight family and about have they been involved in this, or the descendants involved, and how close were you to the historical facts? Did you take any liberties? Did you? And the other question for Matthew is, I'm just wondering what your own ancestor Dandridge McCrae would have thought of you playing this role, and what would he have thought of Knight?
Should I go first?
All right, you
Maybe
go
I should
first.
go first because my answer is going to be short. Who's my ancestor? Dandridge McCrae?
Dandridge McCrae. Apparently, he was a commander of the Arkansas Guards during the Confederacy.
You have a Confederate ancestor, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
You see what you're finding out thanks to
McConaughey
Paris?
founded Little Rock, Arkansas, but I did not know this. Thank you.
So,
You go ahead, Gary.
Gary, now you go to it. So,
We stayed very, very close to the facts. Where you cannot stay absolutely literal to the fact because it's a movie, and first of all, there's not a tremendous amount of written record about Newt Knight, and so you're compelled to imagine certain things. And also where for dramatic purposes we did have to we documented all of that. In fact, I put out a website that has hundreds of pages of footnotes that delineate all the source material that the movie is based on, academically footnoted with the source material. Where we did have to depart slightly at times, I noted that, and it was always to tell, I believe, a deeper truth about the era and what was going on in the era. For example, the character of Moses did not literally exist, but it would have been, I think, a tremendous omission not to put him in the movie, because we would not have experienced, well, one, the determination of African Americans to fight for their own freedom, which is what Moses represented in being a Maroon and defying slavery. But also, I think that it was very, very important to understand his experience through his lens, particularly in Reconstruction in the period after the war, when African Americans rose up and kept engaging this fight, even though the North may have turned their backs. So that's an example of something that's invented in the movie, but it tells a deeper truth in many ways about the Union League movement, about Maroon civilizations, about the self-determination in demanding freedom that was a part of the Civil War era. So there were many things that would have been an omission if I hadn't included them. So is it fictionalization or is it being more thorough? I think it's actually being more thorough.
we'll go for that. Gentleman here.
Merci pour ce très beau film. Et je voulais savoir comment a été reçu le film aux États-Unis avec cette recrudescence des violences policières qui ont visé particulièrement les populations noires. Et donc également comment le film a été reçu dans le contexte des élections américaines.
Well, thank you first. Your film is absolutely wonderful. I mean, we're wondering how your film was perceived when it was released in the States. Not because of the context we know about, obviously, police versus, you know, the black community at the moment, or at least what happened, but also in terms of, in general, of the presidential election. In that context, how was your film welcomed? Gary, it's a question for you.
Sorry, the question was how did I feel about how the film was received?
How did the American public received and view your film in those contexts? We know there's a rise in police
Sure.
sort of, you know,
I think there's a wide variety of reaction to the film, to be honest. Many people received the film with open arms. Some other people, I think, had a little bit of difficulty embracing the complexities of the coalitions that we talked about a moment ago, which is entirely fine. That's what one expects and hopes out of a movie, that it provokes conversation, it stimulates you. The only thing that I would say about all that in general is that, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful, and it's probably made less money than any movie I've ever released. In fact, it has, and in many ways was one of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had. So I think I learned a little something about myself in that regard, and what's important to me, and what is satisfying. And I found this to be both the collaboration with Matthew, which was the best I've ever had with an actor, and also the spirit of the film staying alive and what it means and how proud of it I am, because I think it and Pleasantville are my two best films, and I fully embrace that and have that conviction. And I feel really, really gratified that I was able to make it and that it lives in the world. And I also think that this kind of thing can't be judged at the moment it's released. Some films can. This can't. Like when I do Hunger Games, it's all about the moment it's released. It's a cultural phenomenon, and everybody wants to see Katniss, and I make the movie, and it's about the release. This is about what we think in 5 years and in 10 years. Yes. And Matthew and I put a lot on the line, both of us, to correct a lot of history that was wrong, and a lot of history that had been mistold and rewritten and misrepresented and forgotten. And I'm very, very proud that there's a document in the world on a shelf or in the ether that corrects what Gone with the Wind got wrong, or what Birth of a Nation, the first one, D.W. Griffiths, got wrong. And so time will answer that question better than any particular answer I could give at this moment.
Yeah. Matthew, I see you nodding, but I mean, did you feel also that because of the American elections going on at the moment with, the candidates we have, do you feel that it's all the more relevant in this context that such a film about a man with a clear vision, as you say, is important?
Yes, I do. I think it has specific cultural relevance, and even if you're going to talk politics, relevance to this time in our nation when we have two candidates now. But Mute was libertarian, I would say. Wouldn't that be fair to say? I'd say more libertarian than either of the.
Yes, except that I don't think, except that he would fight strongly for other people. And strict libertarians might say that they just want to be left alone. Okay. But I think that in his relationship to government and wanting a small farmer to be a farmer and autonomous, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it has great relevance. Look, it didn't, as many people didn't get out to see it here in America when it came out as we would hope for. But as Gary said, and I believe this too, it's this is a really qualified and proud quiver to have in our arsenal. It's a feather. I know. I feel it'll be a feather. It is a feather in my cap, and will continue to be one, and even more exposed as one later on. I think it will be as a film that Gary Ross made. If you want to go back and unpack and play Monday Morning Quarterback about why did it not open as big as. I don't know those things. I mean, I know some people that maybe found it a hard pill to swallow, and that it's heavy. Yeah. It's a heavy movie, man, and it's got a lot of historical facts in it, in its dramatic sweep. It's not, hey, let's swing by and check out Free State of Jones and have a conversation in the middle of it. And yeah, I'll get back to that scene. I'm gonna go get some popcorn in the middle of it. No, it's sit down, lock in, and go for a ride and come out going.
Totally. And the other thing about it is, look, Americans have been sold a happy ending to the Civil War. Okay, yeah. We're taught in our history books the slaves were freed, game over. All our problems were solved. It's not what happened. No sooner were those slaves freed than they were re-enslaved. during Reconstruction, and that's just not a thing that everybody really wants to know about their country.
Not everyone wants to come out of a movie feeling like, well, wait a minute, now I feel like I've got more work to do than I felt like I had to do when I came into the theater. This story and this film really send you away going, I got to look in the mirror. I've got more work to do than I thought.
Mademoiselle, voilà.
I'm a little bit scared, sorry. Hi, I have a double question for you. Do you both think that the fight for justice of Newt and the end of the movie could have been different if Newt's nephew didn't die at the beginning of the story? Thank you.
So I think the question that was asked is, would the movie have been different if Newt's nephew hadn't died at the beginning of our story? Well, I think that Newt had a pretty strong conviction about what was going on. I think that it was a way of crystallizing that motivation, but I also think that the feeling of not wanting to die for somebody else's war was growing in him anyway.
Yeah.
And it may have taken longer, but it's, this is a hard question to answer, but I think he probably would have ended up in the same place, just not quite as focused and as dramatically.
Yeah, it's hard to answer that. I mean, if I was going to guess, I'm somewhat part and parcel with what Gary said here. I mean, Newt is a man who started off, when we say started off more libertarian about leave me well enough alone. I'm going to protect my house. I want my acreage. And then that spread out slowly to his neighbor. And then he protected them. And then that slowly went, then is when it got large. Then is when he really started to fight for the mankind and the rights of anyone that was wrong. And that's where he really became a cause. And he, as Gary said, especially in the third act of this picture and after we leave Newt Knight, this picture, that he stayed the course, that he continued to fight for African American rights and throughout, after the war was over. That's when he was really an underdog. So he did, his cause grew, but it is interesting to go back and track events in any of our lives of how we get one incentive of doing, that gets us out the door to get started can all of a sudden blossom and expand into a really, it was a human fight that he was taking on, which started off in the beginning much more of a personal one.
Question ici, le micro, là-bas. Levez-vous, merci.
Hi, it was a great film. I want to know what is your point of view about all the scenes in the trial in the 90s. What is what does it add to the movie? What is the sense of all these scenes?
I think you mean in the 1940s, the Davis Knight trial. Well, that trial did go on. That's something that actually happened. Newt Knight's great-grandson was actually tried for violating these race laws that Mississippi had at the time. I thought it was important to include because, one, it was a way of trying Newt again 100 years later. And also, it was a way of showing that these things remain persistent and don't necessarily get solved or go away. So I wanted the audience to have a feeling that there was no closure, but I didn't want them to just have that at the end of the movie. I wanted them to experience that all through the movie, that there is no happy ending, and you're going to know that there wasn't a happy ending even in the beginning, and that, again, this is it's an unconventional structure, and it violates a lot of the norms of what people expect out of storytelling, which is a conclusive resolution. Our movie is a very open-ended resolution. It stays very open-ended. It doesn't tie things up in a bow. And from the very beginning that there's a nagging story that persists even 100 years later. But I thought that in this particular movie, that was an important thing to do.
Question ici. Pouvez-vous lever, s'il vous plaît?
Bonjour Gary, bonjour Mathieu.
Bonjour. Comment ça va?
Très bien, merci.
Je parle un petit peu de français.
Ah, Gary, ok.
Un petit peu, non, ce n'est pas vrai.
C'est Benoît qui vous en a appris quelques mots aussi. Allez-y.
Félicitations. Bah, déjà, merci pour ce film. Je vais poser ma question en français, du coup, je suis
Bien,
désolé.
pas de problème.
C'est une question plus pour Mathieu. C'est depuis ces dernières années, vous faites des rôles beaucoup plus profonds, beaucoup plus complets. Et du coup, je voulais vous demander lequel vous a le plus fait grandir, mûrir, et aussi sur quels critères vous basiez vos choix dans vos projets, parce que pour le moment, je trouve que c'est un sans faute en fait depuis au moins, je sais pas, peut-être quelques années déjà. C'est vraiment sans faute pour moi. Donc voilà, c'est tout.
Well, this is a question for you, Matthew. First, congratulations about the movie. And Matthew, gentleman is saying that for the last few years, I mean, it seems you've been reaching out to much more profound, deeper, meaningful roles. And he wanted to know which ones maybe lately has made you grow more, so to speak, as a human being and as an actor, and also what kind of criteria you have when you pick up a role or a film. And by the way, for this gentleman, you're making 100% what is right.
Oh, merci, thank you. You know, that's one thing I think every artist wants, is for their work to translate and for it to be received by that man to say, hey, I like what you're doing. That means the work that I'm doing is translating. You know, there's always a gap between what we want to do, what we actually do, what gets recorded, and how someone receives it. And I've always said, to break down the anatomy of translating art, trying to close all those gaps. That's one of my criteria, is trying to have as close to what I intend to do, the final product and how it's received, and the package it's handed to you, and be as close to the initial intention as possible. And those gaps I'm trying to close those gaps in my career. And I think that's part of, to use a golf term, lowering one's handicap. So that's been a goal of mine, and I feel very close to my work now. Each role, you know, I think one of the things that I understood more clearly about 8 years ago was, I kind of said, forget the result. Don't even think about the result. Go for the experience. Let me go have a growing experience in the making of, in the creation of the character, and in the architecture of telling the story. And then if it does well and it translates, it's received, whether it's who likes it or how much box office, that's great if they do, but if it doesn't, did I have an experience? Did I grow from the experience? And I'm happy to say that the roles have been taken, I have grown an experience. I've been choosing dramas. Dramas are, you can really just hang your hat on humanity in a drama. The ceiling for expression of how I personally feel and hear is much higher in a drama, and the basement for pain or rage or sadness is much lower. Even the dirty stuff is much lower in a drama. That's what's great about dramas. They allow such a larger bandwidth of expression, of character, and truth, I think. So if you ever get in trouble in a drama or in this, I always had a clear hook to hang my hat on, and that was humanity, the humanity of Newton Knight. And as far as what another critique for me, I'm trying to make films, one, that I want to see, that I would be my first choice when I go to the theater, and two, to find characters that at some time in the process, hopefully early on, I get a sense that nobody else can play it but me. That's two of the things I would.
And you did get that sense with Newt Knight.
Beg your pardon?
And you did get that sense with Newt Knight.
Newt Knight. Yeah, I was seeing Newt Knight. I like to call it seeing from the inside out. And when I get to where I'm seeing a man that I'm trying to inhabit from the inside out, not objectively at all. Objectivity for me is in pre-production. Once we start rolling the cameras and we're there, I'm hopefully extremely subjective through the man that I'm portraying, and I felt that with Newt Knight.
Yeah, there's a thing I think that happens when you're doing work like that you're fully committed to, and we had a really, really great collaboration, is that you feel a reckless quality almost. You feel that you don't have brakes, you're on this wonderful joyride, the two of you are in a car, it's careening, try not to hit stuff, and enjoy the wind in your face. That's really the feeling that you want to have when you're doing it, and the more brave you feel in making the movie, the more thrilling it is, and the more rich and interesting the work is, the less careful you get. And I think we both have that experience. They're telling us we have a couple more questions or one more question.
We have one question here.
Bonjour, bravo pour le film. J'ai une question pour Gary, une question pour Matthew. Pour Gary, je voudrais savoir, que ce soit dans Hunger Games ou dans ce film-là, finalement, il parle beaucoup du monde rural. Et si pour lui c'était important, le monde rural, parce qu'il y en a un qui se passe dans le futur, et puis ça c'est un historique, et je voulais savoir si ça avait beaucoup d'importance pour lui. Et la question pour Matthew, je voulais savoir si les réalisateurs allaient le pousser de plus en plus loin à avoir un accent plus prononcé que jamais, parce que plus ça va, plus on le voit, le pauvre, avec un accent du Sud terrible, et on l'a vu dans de nombreux films. Alors je me demande où il va s'arrêter avec son accent. Voilà, c'était une question un peu plus légère.
Hello, the first part of the question is for you, Gary. I mean, literally from Hunger Games, for instance, to Free State of Jones, there is something in your cinema that seems to make you very close to the earth, to the rural world. And I wanted to know if rural world and the reality of that world is something that is close to you.
You mean the earth?
The earth, living on the earth,
right?
from the earth. I mean, you see that in Hunger Games in some ways, and you see it again here in this film. Obviously, very different branches, but is it the same tree that it comes from?
Yes, it's true. I like shooting outside. I like being dirty. I like putting on my hiking boots. I like to be in the wild. I like not waiting for them to light a set. I like dealing with elements that are kind of primitive, and I like feeling connected to a story that feels epic and urgent and raw. Now, having said that, I'm making a movie about with 8 women about in the fashion world right now. So I have
needed that after Free State.
Probably needed a transition into something else. Yes, but so ask me that at the end. But yes, I have felt that, and what can I say? I like being outside. You know.
Nothing wrong with that. And the last tongue-in-cheek questions to you, Matthew, is that your accent seems to be going deeper, deeper south every time. Is that something that you're obsessed with, or the director's obsessed with, or do you enjoy it?
No, I think what you're getting in with Newt Knight is that's Mississippi. That's not my accent now. That's not Texas. And Mississippi is much slower. I don't even.
You get back there.
Mississippi.
And low.
And it's low, and it's slow, and it's got a different. It's got a different meter to its rhythm than my southern accent. So it sounds maybe deeper southern, maybe because it's deeper south. But that was Newt Knight, and that's how he sounded, and that's what they sounded like in Mississippi. At that time.
Well, thank you so much for bringing Mississippi to Paris.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us, really. Thank you so much. We are very grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Buddy,